Do you have any idea about how much blood have been spilled so far in Christian Elias wars? Well, if you don't, then I have a number for you. More than 10 million deaths have been caused due to Christian Elias wars. Forget about those who have been injured, those who have been forcefully converted, and those who have suffered psychological trauma. These more than 10 million deaths comes from papal persecution, inquisition campaigns, crusade wars, and other Christian Elias wars. So the notion of live or let live has been turned down by these Christian missionaries into another notion, that is either you live or I live. Namaste everyone. This is Avinash Vasisht, and today I'm going to take you on the tour of declassifying the troubling records of Christian missionaries in India. But before that, I would like to extend my thanks and gratitude to Sangam Talks, and in particular Rahul Divanji, for giving me this opportunity to have a detailed discussion on such a highly contentious issue. In this video, I will be covering a report published in year 1956 titled Christian Missionary Activities Inquiry Committee Report. This report was popularly known as Niyogi Committee Report, as the person who heads the committee was Dr. M. Bhavani Shankar Niyogi, retired Chief Justice of Nagpur High Court, along with 5 other members. This report was divided into 2 volumes and 3 parts. In this video, I will be covering some highlights of Volume 1 so as to give you a fair glimpse of Christian missionaries' menace and their frightening track record in India. But before diving into the details of this report, I would like to ask you a very pertinent question, that do you have any idea about how much blood have been spilled so far in Christian Elias wars? Well, if you don't, then I have a number for you. More than 10 million deaths have been caused due to Christian Elias wars. Forget about those who have been injured, those who have been forcefully converted, and those who have suffered psychological trauma. These more than 10 million deaths comes from papal persecution, inquisition campaigns, crusade wars, and other Christian Elias wars. So if I would like to put it in a present context, it is just like eliminating 1/3 population of Canada. Now, if this doesn't convince you much, and anyone wants you to go into the apologetics of defending Christianity by giving good Christian, bad Christian argument, then I have something more to present before you, and that is the mission and vision statement of prominent Christian organizations who were sitting at the steering wheel of Christendom, governing and influencing the decisions of Christian missionaries who were operating on the Indian soil. So the first one is International Missionary Council. In year 1952, under missionary obligations of the church, published, and I quote, in wide regions of the world, the major problem is hunger. In the present situation, there are opportunities for the church, constitutional provisions of several newly independent states, new resources for mass evangelism through press, film, radio, and television. So you can see that Christian missionaries were looking at human miseries like hunger and poverty as an opportunity to seek the goal of mass proselytization. Now, it is also important uh, to note that towards the end of world wars, there was a movement started within the Christian world called ecumenical movement. This movement was primarily focused to seek unity within different Christian organizations from different denominations to come under one umbrella, to have with a goal to have domination across the globe under Christian flag. I want you to remember the name of this movement because in the later slides I have covered some important details about this movement. Now, in year 1945, the Commission on Just and Durable Peace openly declared that one of the 4 points of peace requiring Christian actions to work for Christian unity on a worldwide basis, and to achieve that Christian forces of the world must become a well organized and militant minority. Now, after having a perusal on the casualty statistics and their sinister mission and vision statement, it is quite obvious to have some questions in our mind. And those questions are that for how long they have been operating on the Indian soil, what was the scale of their expansion, what means they have adopted to persuade Indians, and why is it a matter of concern for us. So this report, this Niyogi committee report, has answered to all these questions in a very exhaustive manner. Now, coming back to the basics of the committee, the locations which were under the immediate inquiry of the committee, majority of the areas were come from Madhya Pradesh state. Incidental to that, there are certain other areas which came from Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Rajasthan, and Maharashtra states. Now actually there were 14 districts which were under the immediate scrutiny of the committee. Uh, those 14 districts were Raigad, Sarguja, Raipur, Bilaspur, Amravati, Nimar, Yavatmal, Akola, Buldhana, Mandala, Jabalpur, Betul, Shindwara, and Balaghat. So in all these 14 districts, the committee has launched the investigation to look into the grievances of indigenous sites against the activities of Christian missionaries. Now, it is also important to mention here the past record of MP state in terms of their reorganization and merger plan, because in this report you will find repeated references of reorganization and merger plan of MP state. So on 1st of November 1956, MP state came into existence. Earlier it was Central Province and Berar. Just after independence, MP was created with Nagpur as its capital. It includes southern part of today's MP and northeast portions of today's Maharashtra. Now, in year 1956, the state was reorganized, and its parts were merged with Madhya Bharat, Vindhya Pradesh, and Bhopal, with Bhopal as its capital. So this was a short summary of MP state. It will help you to understand the locations which were fall under the immediate scrutiny of the committee. Now, when we look at the locations which were under the scrutiny of the committee, there are certain common connecting threads in those locations, and those are that majority of the areas were bordering regions. There was high concentration of tribal population. Majority of these areas have remote and terrain areas. So obviously there was an issue of there was law and order issue. And lastly, there was a high concentration of rich minerals and natural resources. So after looking at all these common connecting threads, it is quite easy to understand that why these locations were on the prime target of Christian missionaries. Now, as far in terms of constitution of this committee, it is unique in many terms, as the committee was constituted by the inherent powers of the state, unlike a committee constituted under the Commission of Inquiry Act or the Judicial Committee. The most striking and the prominent feature about this committee is that it lacks the element of coerciveness. And what I mean by that is that this committee cannot demand compulsory presence of any witness, neither it demands any compulsory written statement from any person. And if in case they have floated any questionnaire, that they cannot even seek mandatory replies from the person. So this was the most unique feature about the committee. Now, even the committee lacks the element of coerciveness, yet you can imagine the success of this committee by looking at the exploration statistics of the committee. So as far as the exploration of the committee is concerned, they have visited 77 centers, 11,360 persons approximately were contacted, 375 written statements were received, person interviewed came from 700 villages. The committee has made visits to schools, churches, hospitals, leper homes, hostels, etc., which were on the prime target of Christian missionaries in that region. The committee has also consulted a number of published books, periodicals, reports, and pamphlets, which I have also quoted in my subsequent slides in the form of references. And the committee has also floated questionnaire in which 385 replies received, 55 from Christian lobbies, and rest of the other 330 from the indigenous side, that is the non-Christian side. Now, as far as the scope of inquiry is concerned, initially the inquiry was confined purely to local regions, and it was grievance centric. Now, what I mean by this grievance centric is that the representations and complaints made to the state by the indigenous community, only on that basis the committee has took the cognizance. Apart from that, there was nothing into the consideration of the committee. But in the later stage, after gathering the evidences and documents, the committee felt the need to expand its scope pan-India in order to inquire into the extra religious and political motives of the Christian missionaries. Now, this pressing necessity of expanding the scope of inquiry could be understood by three straight simple facts, and those are: In terms of foreign donation, 29.27 crores received within a span of 4 years, that is 1950 to 54. This amount annually stood around 73,175,000. Now, as far as the number of missionaries and foreign proselytizers are concerned, 38 missionaries were active in the central province and Berar region from different denominations. 480 active foreign proselytizers were involved in those missionary projects. They were awarded with heavy salaries and allowances. Now, as far as the proselytizing figures are concerned, the most relevant data on this point was 1941 census. The most interesting aspect of this census is that it was made community-wise, and the aspect of religion was totally absent. One Indian author, S.N. Parashar, breaks the mystery behind this community-wise census by decoding the number of converts, increase in the number of converts in that decade, that is from 1931 to 1941. The author quoted that there was an increase of 34,74,128 converts noted in India in that decade. In Hyderabad region alone, there was a jump of 141.6% converts was recorded. So in the light of these three facts, we can uh, we can we can have a fair understanding of on what scale they are operating, uh, what amount of donations they are receiving, and what they are achieving in terms of results. So this in itself is this data, these facts are itself in self evident to raise alarms on the activities of Christian missionaries in India. So in short, this report has everything that we need to know about the activities of Christian missionaries in India. Once Gandhi has also remarked about the nefarious activities of Christian missionaries. He said, and I quote, "Mammon has been sent to India to serve India, and God has remained behind." Although Gandhi has, on several other occasions, have also remarked on the activities of Christian missionaries, but this was the most relevant statement in terms of decoding the modus operandi of Christian missionaries in India. Now, as far as the responses of parties are concerned, initially Christian side was very cooperative. They accompanied companies committee in their visits. Later on, Roman Catholic lobby protested against the inquiry committee, and they have lodged a petition in the High Court under the writ of mandamus, which was later on turned down by the High Court. As far as the indigenous side is concerned, the response was throughout positive. They have submitted their grievances both in writing and orally. They have accompanied committee in their visits. Lawyers and activists from their side have made their representations. Now, when I look at this whole scenario, the way in which uh, the blame game of Christian missionaries uh, were played out, and the way in which they were pursuing the inquiries of the committee, uh, um, I prefer to call it a punch fight between an elephant and a mouse, where the elephant was heavily guarded with the punches of foreign fundings, organized release structure with centralized command, and have the favorable ground of corrupt education system, misgovernance, and also have the shield of foreign-backed political entities. Whereas on the other hand, mouse has nothing but deep-rooted indigenous culture and diversity at its stake in his defense. So this was a flawed equivalence which was played out. Now, in order to help you understand more clearly this scenario, I have a questionnaire to follow up, and the questionnaire is: Who was on the steering wheel of social and economic strata when World Wars finished? Colonizer or the colonized? The bargain of New World Order favors whom? The colonizer or the colonized? What was the dominant religion of colonizers? Christianity or the indigenous faith? Who has proselytization as integral part of their religious beliefs? Colonizer or the colonized? So if your answer lies in the option A, then I think you have fairly understand the scenario which I'm presenting before you uh, by calling it a case of flawed equivalence. Now, even if I disagree with the way in which this whole scenario was played out, but still I'm interested to hear out the allegations of the Christian lobbies, and their allegations were basically this: first is institutional harassment, second one is communalization of politics, third one is unnecessary halt in progressive and development works, Fourth one is propagation of hatred against Christianity. So let us come to these allegations one by one. So the first one is institutionalized harassment. Now, what happened was that this plan of this reorganization and merger plan, that is the integration of MP state, itself seen as an tool of institutionalized harassment by the Christian lobbies. And the reason behind is that earlier the grip of Christian missionaries on the fragmented Aboriginal community was very firm. But when this reorganization plan came into existence and it was executed, those fragmented Aboriginals uh, come into clubbed into one region, and therefore their unity gets fortified, and this gives a frustration to the Christian community, to the Christian missionaries. So the inside fact about this story is that the population of Aboriginals counted 18% before merger. After merger, the population percentage stood around 53%. The percentage rise somewhere stood around 35%. So an increase of 35% in the population of Aboriginals after the reorganization plan um, is a very noticeable increase. And you can imagine that when these Aboriginal community comes together, and then obviously they will be more they will be unforbiddable to for Christian missionaries to pursue their goal of mass proselytization. Now let's come to the second allegation, that is communalization of politics. So I would just like to state 2 3 blunt facts before you, and then I will leave the question to the wisdom of your intellect, that you will decide that who is communalizing the politics. So the ecumenical movement uh, stated policy for Asia is, and the movement is meant to combat the utopian expectation of non-Christian leans and discontinuance of rapid development modern technology industry in Asia. So for them, the expectations of non-Christian leans, like spiritual awakening, uh, tolerance, humanity, are all utopian expectations in their eyes, and they are seeing it as a roadblock uh, in pursuing their goal of mass conversion. Now, Mr. MacLeish, a trustee of World Dominion Press, which maintained a close relation with International Missionary Council, proposed conversion of 6 lakh villages within a span of 10 years, with the stated goal to overcome the forces of secularism, nationalism, and material industrialism. So for them, expectations of non-Christian leans is a problem. Secularism is also a problem. Nationalism and material industrialism is also a problem and a roadblock in their goal to pursue the mass proselytization projects. So now I left, as I said earlier, that I left this question to the wisdom of your intellect to decide that who is actually having a problem with with the notion of secularism right from the very beginning. So this blame of communalization of politics doesn't actually hold any water uh, when it comes from the mouth of any Christian missionary organization. Now, the third allegation was the unnecessary halt of progressive works, the so-called progressive works. So, no doubt, the Yogi Committee report paid tribute to welfare projects in the report of Christian missionaries, but at the same time, it underlines the sublime thinking that was lurking behind it by quoting Butterfield report, which advocates mass proselytization as the end goal of every Christian missionary who is operating on Indian soil. Blue Book annual report of evangelical and reformed churches in year 1954 expressed worries over material progress of India. They said, and I quote, India is changing so rapidly that even those who are closely associated with country through missionaries and river find it difficult to keep up with every phase of socio-economic and political development. Within 7 years after gaining independence, India has moved into the place of world leadership in spite of droughts, floods, and other calamities. Therefore, resurgent Hinduism have been held in check. 2.5 million acres of additional land brought under irrigation. Food grains were increased by 11 million tons. New fertilizer plants, laboratories, research centers were opened. So, to what extent the Christ would be regarded as the hope for the world in such a situation. So their worry was not that whether India was progressing or not. Their worry was that there should be a monopoly in terms of credit claims. They need to claim the credit in the name of Christ for all these welfare projects. Now, the fourth allegation is actually the inner intentions communicated in the pamphlets and the published literature of Christian missionaries. There are Christian missionaries and their think tanks. They have insisted to prefer competition over coexistence. For example, Blue Book Annual Report of Officers and Board of Evangelical and Reformed Church in 1945 clearly stated that on Christian and social elections, competition is preferred over coexistence. So, and the advantage which they get in this competition is that there was no reward sharing in competition. They are looking for monopolizing the social works so that they will claim it under the name of Christ in order to pursue their goal of mass conversion. So the notion of live or let live has been turned down by these Christian missionaries into another notion, that is either you live or I live. I would also like to go into the details of a very serious charge um, which was in the allegations of Christian missionaries, that they have been branded as anti-national force. So again, I would like to state some facts in this regard. And so first is the use of terminologies in the Christian literature. This committee has observed several terminologies which were used in Christian literature, their magazines, their pamphlets, which were very problematic in their interpretation. So the first one is rooted in the soil versus rooted in the Christ. It was interpreted by International Missionary Conference held in Wellington in year 1952. They said, and I quote, "The church can only be rooted in the Christ. Upon this interpretation, it has been emphasized that the task before the younger churches was a formidable one, as they had to be rooted in the Christ first before they could be related to the soil." So you can clearly see that here they were asking to owe allegiance to the Christ whenever there was a dispute or a conflict that demands allegiance to the soil. Now, the second problematic terminology was the colony of heaven. This terminology was used by Christian missionaries repetitively with the rider that it should be a colony of heaven in the country, but not of the country. So again, the loyalty aspects they are demanding was into the favor of church and the ideology, and not and therefore not that should not be rooted in the country. So this was the basic difference. Now the third problematic terminology was the historical community of redeemed. Now this implies that that the Christian community is redeemed from the past sins, hence more superior than the others. They prefer to call themselves as the chosen one in their literature. Now there was another concept which is very problematic, advocated by Christian missionaries, was the concept of supranationalism. This concept basically says that churches influenced with nationalism, independent in temper and organization, yet needing help from other churches, need to know new understanding, rooted in the soil, yet supranationalism in their witness and obedience. And witness and obedience to whom? To the Christ. And who were the torchbearers of Christ in this world? Obviously, the Christian missionaries. So again, there was a question of disloyalty towards the nation. Now, apart from that, they have a track record of troubling literature and the statement of prominence. For example, in an article titled "Christian Awake," propounded clearly that when there is a conflict between loyalty between Christ and country, the true Christian has to necessarily choose obedience towards the Christ. In year 1954, Dr. Pickett, while addressing Assembly of World Council of Churches, remarked one of the reasons of church unity was to obviate the danger of the growth of nationalism. So for them, again, nationalism is also a problem. Some more additional facts in this regard: that article published in missionary papers like Nishkalank, Adivasi, Jharkhand, they have advocated openly the establishment of Pakistan. And there was also a demand of separate Adivasistan raised during 1938 by Christian missionaries. It received funds from Muslim League as well. This report quote several references and sources to certify this fact. Now they have troubling. Now we, apart from that, we have troubling precedences and dangerous fallouts of Christian missionaries working against the interest of country. And the first most important example comes from Chota Nagpur region, where missionaries of Chota Nagpur offered 10,000 armed converts from coal tribal community to serve the interest of British India during 1857. The same sort of incidents observed in Burma as well, where Dr. Manson offered Karen converts for armed assistance. In fact, the recent hostilities in the Northeast region also points in that same direction. They are self-explanatory. I think there is no need to explain further on that. Now, even if for a moment we ignore their activities and their sinister mission and vision plans in India, and we go outside in the Asian region, there too they have a very troubling record. For example, in China, a person Caprini sent to this region by missionaries to apparently deliver the message of the Christ to heathens. In reality, he was on the mission of espionage. Now, apart from that, in Japan, same story seen to be played out. A Spanish captain of the ship admitted on record that the purpose of converting people in Japan was to secure allies to invade their motherland. So they not only have troubling track record in India, but even outside India and other Asian regions, they have a record which raises serious question mark on their conduct and the way in which they're operating on the Indian soil. And now there's one more important aspect here which I need to discuss. That is the working of churches in India. Their independence is questionable. And why would I say so? Because it is evident in many records and the way in which churches in India operates on the command and the influence of prominent Christian organizations sitting outside the country. So the first one is that the records of Xavier itself certifies this fact that he enlisted the support of Portuguese king to put political pressure on the on Hindus to become Christians. Apart from that, major church denominations in India were under the control of World Church Councils operated from outside India. Some important churches were Church of India Burma, United Church of North India, Church of South India, Mar Thoma Syrian Church of Malabar, Orthodox Syrian Church of Malabar, Evangelical Lutheran Church of India. All these churches work on the commands of World Church Council. Now, I would also like to discuss here the financial aspect of this whole story. And there was a popular saying goes like this, that he who pays the piper calls the tune. So in terms of financial assistance from the foreign sources, from January 1950 to June 1954, a sum of rupees 29.27 crores received in India from the foreign sources from different countries. Those are USA, Canada, Belgium, Denmark, France, Germany, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, including UK as well. And this data of foreign funding came from the records of Reserve Bank of India. Now, as far as the involvement of foreign missionary personnels are concerned, we have a data on that count as well. As in the year 1940, 5,417 foreign missionary personnels were active. In 1947, this number has come down to 5040. And in 1955, the number somewhere stood around 4,877. So in the light of all these facts, that is the way in which they are receiving foreign funds, the amount in which they are pumping money inside India to run the proselytization projects, and the number of foreign personnel involved in pursuing the projects of Christianity is quite very alarming, isn't it so? And it is not only alarming, but it raises a question about the the compromised integrity of India in that point of time. Now, in addition to that, I would also like to mention here that the numbers which I have quoted just before you, the actual numbers exceed the actual statistics, and the reason behind is that there are several smaller Christian missions active in India at that point of time, which do not have any attachment to the organized church structure. So these numbers mm, are fairly increased when we add these smaller missions also in those statistics. Now, as far as the MP region is concerned, in Madhya Pradesh there were 480 foreign proselytizers were working through various missions, and they came from at least 20 foreign countries. The data is before you. You can see that. Now, there is another interesting aspect which I would like to discuss here, and that is what proselytizers are receiving in terms of money. So there was a starking difference between what Indian proselytizers are receiving and what American proselytizers are receiving. So Indian proselytizers are receiving somewhere $63 per month, along with vehicle allowances and other benefits. But this number got fairly increased when it comes to the salary and the pay scale of American proselytizers. Annually, this amount somewhere stood around 90 lakh, 7,223. And along with that amount, they were allocated with fully furnished bungalows and other allowances as well. So this difference is very alarming, and maybe I can guess that this difference in the salaries is because the foreign missionaries have more trust on the modus operandi of American proselytizers than the Indian proselytizers. So now the question at the end that comes to us is, what is the way forward? So I would like to end this video by citing the recommendations of the committee, Niyogi committee report, and those recommendations are: first one is to place an amendment in the constitution clarifying that the right to propagate only available to Indian citizens. Second one is rules relating to the recruitment of doctors, nurses to provide conditions against evangelical activities. Third one is circulation of literature meant for religious conversion propaganda without the approval of a state should be prohibited. Then welfare of minor and orphans is the primary duty of the state. Any non-government organization dealing with them need prior approval of the state government. The fifth one is that no foreign agency should be permitted to secure foreign assistance except through government channels. Sixth one is that no foreign or organization receiving foreign funds should be allowed to operate in scheduled areas without written undertaking that such person or organization will not involve in any political activity. Then the seventh one is that the programs of social and economic welfare by religious organizations must need prior approval of the state. The eighth one is that the use of medical and other services for the purpose of conversion must be prohibited under law. And the ninth one is that it suggests the implementation of a provision in the constitution that prohibits imparting of religious education in schools without the approval of parents and guardians. 10th one is that the religious institutions should be prohibited to engage in recruiting labor for tea plantation, as there are several instances quoted in the report where people from indigenous community were abducted and they were sent for forced labor in tea plantation in Assam. So these are all the recommendations. I would like to end my presentation here. And although I have some differences with the recommendations which were made by the committee, but I'll cover that part in the next video. Till that, I'll take your leave. Namaste.